What are the odds by Mike Lindell from crack addict to CEO continued on chapter 19. The Dream. I don't even remember how I made it home from Vegas, but I remember vividly what happened next. One night in the spring of 2004, I sat straight up in bed, holding on to the tail of a dream. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Words from my dream were still running through my head. It was my own voice repeating the words, "Where's my pillow?" The phrase was what you'd say if you laid down at night and found your pillow missing. A pillow is a very personal thing. No one says, "Where's the pillow?" But why was I dreaming about pillows? I wasn't sure, but as I sat there in bed with Karen snoozing quietly beside me, the images from the dream were still vivid. It was me running around yelling, "Where's my pillow?" Really weird. In all my years of trying to find a good pillow, I had found only one that sort of worked. It had been a gift from my father in law until it finally fell apart. I had insisted on sleeping on it everywhere I went. My pillow, I thought. It could make a good brand name. Then I thought, well, no, that sounds dorky. Who would put my in front of anything? On the other hand, there was something about it. I got up, headed to the kitchen, grabbed a notepad, and started writing, "My pillow, my pillow, my pillow," over and over again. Something about it just felt right. Excited, I kept experimenting with different ways of writing the name until it began to take the shape of a logo. I wrote it hundreds of times the same way you practice signing your name when you're a kid. I was still doodling at 3 a.m., and now the kitchen was papered with sheets from the notebook, as if some mad scientist had spent hours brainstorming a new formula. My daughter Lizzie came upstairs, poured herself a glass of water, and sipped from it as she looked around at the blizzard of pages. She asked what I was doing. Still scribbling, I told her I was going to invent a pillow. It's going to be called My Pillow, and it's going to change the world. Lizzie gave me the kind of look only a teenager can give. "That's really random, Dad," she said and went back downstairs. Change the world? Where did that come from? How is a pillow going to change the world? I didn't know. But when I woke up from that pillow dream, I felt hope for the first time since losing the $50,000 in Las Vegas. I had a purpose now. I grabbed onto that purpose and held on. That night, my brother Corey and I had plans to head to a nearby casino. I'd been able to borrow money to card count, which was how I was keeping food on the table. Corey showed up at my house and we got in my truck to head over to the blackjack tables in Danbury, Wisconsin. "We needed to make a little detour first," I told him. "Where to?" Corey said. "Duluth." I wanted to go see Heather at the University of Minnesota campus in Duluth, at the tip of Lake Superior. At 8 p.m., Corey and I showed up at her townhome unannounced. I held out one of the many scraps of paper on which I had experimented with a version of the words "My Pillow." "I want you to turn this into a logo." Heather took the paper, sat down at her desk, and pulled out a sketch pad. As Corey and I watched, she rendered different versions of the words. I urged her to connect the Y and the end of "my" with the P in pillow. It didn't take long before Heather had created what would become the first My Pillow logo. "Perfect," I said. Corey and I visited with her for a few more minutes, then left. After 2 weeks, I was still babbling about my pillow. When is he going to quit talking about this pillow thing? The kids asked Karen, one after the other. It's just a phase, she said. He'll get over it. As you already know, I did not get over it. I knew a few things about the pillow I wanted to invent. First, it would have to be adjustable. You would be able to shape the pillow to fit your head and neck, and it would hold the shape that was perfect for you. Second, the pillow would stay cool. Third, you would be able to wash and dry it. Finally, I wanted the pillow to last a long time. One of the first things I did was market research. I stopped in at Bed Bath and Beyond in the Southtown Shopping Center in Bloomington, where I spent hours examining every pillow on the shelves. The manager finally came over and asked me if I needed help. Nope, I'm good, I said. Just doing some pillow research. Can I show you some of our best sellers? He said. These pillows over here are very popular. Those pillows are awful, I said. I'm going to come back someday with the best pillow you've ever seen. You're going to sell them in your store one day. The manager didn't seem to know quite what to say. He smiled politely. Well, okay. Just let me know if you need any help. I left Bed Bath and Beyond with some zip up pillow covers I could use to develop my pillow, as well as information about pillow potential types of pillow fill. It wouldn't be down fill, flat and shapeless, or memory foam sleeps too hot. But I did feel that foam was what I was looking for. The next stop was Rochford Supply, and I took Darren with me. Rochford was a leading Midwest supplier of textiles, marine fabrics, vinyl, leather, and foam. I told the owner what I was interested in. After we talked it through, I decided on a certain type of foam, bought a huge batch of foam blocks, and carted them away in my truck. Back home, Darren and I went out to the back deck and got right to work, ripping golf sized pieces from foam blocks and stuffing them into the zippered cases. Tiny flecks of foam soon covered the deck and swirled around us, getting caught in the late spring winds. Even with the two of us working, it took a while to hand tear enough foam to fill just one of the zippered cases. When we finally did, I zipped it up and took it inside for a test drive. Lying down on the couch, I nestled my head into my prototype and almost immediately stood up again. Nope. The next day, I went back to Rochford Supply for a different type of foam. This went on the next day, and the next, and the next. One foam was too hard, and the next was too soft. I was living the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, except that nothing I found was just right. Some foams crumbled in my hands every time I tried to tear them. Others were so tough I could barely rip them with my hands and had to resort to chopping them up with the electric knife I used to fillet fish. Some of my friends thought I was crazy. A couple of them said, "What are you on crack?" Then they'd say, "Oh, that's right, you are." Soon Darren was coming with me to Rochford's at least 3 times a week. Then we'd sit out in the backyard tearing up the latest foam sample until our hands ached. Those hours remained special to me, a time of bonding with my youngest son. I used our breaks to sketch out maps and diagrams of the factory I envisioned owning someday. I showed him a blueprint style drawing I'd done, pointing to different rooms. Whatever pillow fill we wind up using, we'll fill the pillow covers in this room, we'll sew them over here, and in this area, we'll have quality control. What's quality control? He said, dusting foam flecks from his hair. I paused, wondering about the best way to explain quality control to a kid. Finally, I had it. That's where you make sure your product is as good as what you would make for yourself or your best friend. I kept that first drawing. Today, you can overlay it on the site of the My Pillow factory in Shakopee. It's an almost perfect match. After trying 94 different foam types and combinations, we were close. And then one day we did it. I could shape the pillow and it would stay put. It worked, but not so fast. The shaped foam wouldn't come apart, which means it didn't work. What I envisioned was a fill that held its shape but released with just a light touch. We kept working day after day, shredding and tearing until finally we hit on a prototype filled with a special foam of three different types and sizes. That was in my backyard in August 2004. The fill in my pillow hasn't changed since. What I envisioned was a fill that held its shape, but released with just a light touch. We kept working day after day. Mm. That was in my backyard in August 2004. The fill in my pillow hasn't changed since. Still, the pillow didn't release correctly. After some more research and with the help of foam engineers, we hit on a solution, an additive that caused the foam to stick or slide, depending on the type and amount of pressure applied. Even better, this new additive, which would become proprietary, treated the foam in such a way that the pillows could now be washed and dried. Another problem solved. As the pillow project took shape, literally, so did my bankruptcy case. We began to receive notices that the trustees of the court were doing a deep dive into the Lindell family finances, which were, of course, a disaster. Karen knew I'd lost all our available cash on my two trips to Las Vegas, but she didn't know that I suspected Neff was never going to sell the contract back to us. If Neff followed through on his threat, we would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars that should have been ours for the sale of Schmitty's. In January 2004, Karen and I took a week long trip to a beach town in Mexico using money I borrowed from a friend. This was part of our pattern. It didn't matter whether we were flush or broke, we took our annual vacations. I'd heard it was easy to get coke in Mexico, and it didn't take long for us to meet that beachfront dealer I mentioned before, the one we called the Greek. I stayed up for 7 days straight, fueled by a steady supply of cocaine. The whole time I thought about Neff. How was I going to get the Schmitty's contract back? On the plane home, while I was staring out the window at passing clouds, I came up with a plan. Soon after we got back from Mexico, I went to see Neff again unannounced. As before, he checked me for a wire, and we talked while driving the perimeter of the cities in his car. I resumed my reasonable nice guy act. I had realized the only way to win with a guy like Neff was to keep acting as if I believed we were friends. Neff, the bankruptcy hearing is coming up soon, I said, repeating my earlier warning that the court was going to challenge the legitimacy of my filing. That was now coming to fruition. I know the lawyers are on to us. Forget it, he said abruptly. I know where you're going with this, and you're not getting anything. You're an addict. No one will ever believe you. We talked about this, I reminded him. What's going to happen when the court finds out I sold that contract to you for pennies on the dollar? I've been looking into it. It's called a clawback. They will pull that contract in as part of my actual assets. They'll also know it's a fraud. Then we're both going to be in trouble. Neff had warned me that I'd go to jail for bankruptcy fraud, but the possibility that he might go with me seemed to him an entirely new concept. I suspected that he'd been able to steal from addicts before because most deals likely didn't involve lawyers and judges. Because of the bankruptcy, this one did. Neff said nothing, just drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. I think I've got a solution that will work for us both, I said. You could sell the contract, to a friend of mine for 70,000. That's 10 grand more than you paid for it. Plus, you've made money on payments from Craig, so you're coming out way ahead. When the court looked at what would now be two sales, I'd hoped they'd conclude that that valuation on the bar wasn't as high as they thought. After all, it was only worth what the market would bear. At first, Neff resisted, and he surrendered. He would sell the contract to my friend Bob, who had agreed to buy the contract as a favor to me. I had arranged to pay Bob a good rate of interest so it would be a win win. Bob would make good money, and I'd get some of my equity back. As importantly, I'd get rid of Neff. On the day of the closing, Neff showed his colors one more time. He demanded an additional $10,000. If he didn't get it, I mean, right then, he was going to walk. I felt sick, but told Bob to quick sign the papers anyway. I would accept another $10,000 loss. The instant the deal was done, I told Bob to put Neff on the phone. Then I unloaded. I sat up at night after I sat up night after night thinking about how you were taking everything from me and worse, from my family. I shouted into the phone. I want you to know that I think you are the most evil person I have ever known. Neff laughed. You're an addict, he said. You'd have lost it all anyway. I hung up on him and stared at the phone as if it contained a poisonous snake.